If you look at various parts of the markets, and Dom Shu did a great job, we technically oversold. So you could have, especially in tech, you could have a relief rally based on that. If the bilateral meeting breaks down completely, then what we're going to find is there are still certain people that are overexposed of benchmark positioning. And you will see those people finally being shaken out. I think
panicking.
Yeah, not panicking is a strong word, but being shaken out. I think what has surprised a lot of people is that the downward movement in certain sectors was so severe and so sudden that the tourist investors haven't had time to get out yet. So there's still trapped money if...
Not just that. I mean, if you're really looking at this, if this is our last best hope of finding some way of avoiding those tariffs coming in January, those massive tariffs, and what that would mean overseas and what that would mean here, if this is your last best hope and that doesn't happen, I think a lot of people on Wall Street would have to shift their opinion from thinking that this is the journey to this is the destination.
Correct. And you should feel sorry for both the chair and the vice chair of the Fed, who have to speak ahead of that. So they have to signal ahead of that whether they're still on for a December hike and whether they're still on for what they've signaled about next year. And they've got this big uncertainty a few days later.
If the tariffs come on, you think the Fed would not raise rates?
I think if they're fair, I think they themselves will realize that the prospects for the economy are not as bright as what we have right now.
That was my guess on all of this, too. But Ian Shepherdson said in the last hour that he thinks if the tariffs come on, the Fed would actually be under more pressure to have to raise rates because you're looking at big inflationary headwinds or big inflationary flames that would suddenly be facing a very bad scenario. He said in the 70s we waited too long. You can't do that at that point. You would have to raise rates.
I don't think I agree, because what they'll say, this is a once and for all impact on the price level, not inflation. The price level has been well below where it would have been had we met 2%. And they would use that as an excuse of saying, you know what, we're looking at the price level as well as the price changes. So I don't think they would overreact. I think they would be very cautious. They will say, let it play out. But in the meantime, we're not going to, make things worse.
How do you calculate the president's rhetoric and commentary about the Fed and how that relates to the psychology of the Fed?
So I think they are most likely ignoring the comments, wishing that they hadn't.
But occasionally you hear people say, well, they have to raise because otherwise they'd be giving in to the president, and then they'd look like they weren't independent, and that all of this becomes this sort of...
So I said in the beginning, for them to back off now, a hike in December, is problematic for two reasons. One is the economy remains relatively strong, and two, they will not want to appear to be sensitive to political interference.
So even if they're saying they're not paying attention, they're paying attention.
Yes, but they're not paying it.
They could hide it with, with being data dependent and saying that, what do you do when the facts change? Sir, who was that? Keynes.
Keynes.
Your hero, so.
So, Joe, this is important because so far, this Fed has signaled it's a different Fed. This Fed has looked forward and has said we're beyond data dependence. Now, in the last week or so, the word data dependency has started coming back.
It has.
So this is going to be a real test as to whether the Powell Fed is indeed a different Fed, or whether at the first sign of market volatility, they flinch like the Bernanke Fed and the Yellen Fed.
Exactly. He's got a tough, out of all, a lot of them have had some pretty, they can look really good, really smart, keep the punch bowl. He's got the toughest job. He could end up going down in history as the guy, taking the punch bowl away and bad things happened. It's tough for
remember,
I don't know if it's worth it. How much you make as the head of the Fed? I know. How much you make?
I think
not that much.
I don't know.
I don't know if it's worth it.